Hi, this is Everest Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom. Now today I'm going to do another painting using Gina K's Mayflower stamp set. This is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to do it in watercolor. I'm going to transfer the stamp set over to a piece of watercolor paper, and then I'm going to paint it all in watercolor. But at the end I'm going to show you how to do a wonderful background, a new way of doing it, maybe you haven't seen before, and also how I can turn it into a painting or into a greeting card. I'll show you both options. So I can't wait to show you how I did it. So let's go to my painting table and let's get started. This is 140-pound Gemini watercolor paper, and I stamped the design from Mayflowers using the Amalgam Ink Warm Glow, and I'm using a silver brush number 8 round brush, and I'm mixing up some color here. This is Opera, Holbein Watercolor Opera. And it's a beautiful color. I really like it. It's a bright red, but it's also a nice, good color to put in for flowers. So I'm starting out here with a light mixture, and I'm going to fill in the flower petals. First of all, with a light layer. So I've added about a 50% water, 50% paint mixture to give me a nice light value. So my first layer is going to be a light value of Opera, and I'm going to cover the majority of the petals on this flower. Now this arrangement. And the Amalgam ink, which was the Warm Glow, which I chose, is a permanent ink substance, which allows me to use watercolor to go over. Otherwise, if I didn't have a waterproof ink, the ink below would spread with the water from the brush. Here I'm picking up some of the excess moisture with a tissue, and this keeps the value light. So I'm trying to keep the value about the same on all the petals. And I'm leaving a little bit of white paper. I always leave a little bit of white paper showing because I want to show a little variety, even in the petals. A little variety of lights and dark colors. So the value is very important to keep it light at this point, and also maybe to leave some white paper showing. The white paper gives a little sparkle and a little interest in the design, and it keeps it from being boring with just one color. And I'm picking up a little bit of excess moisture with the tissue, keeping the value light here on this first layer, just blocking in the colors on the petals of the flowers. And there's the light value layer. Now I'm mixing up a darker value, the same color, Opera, but I'm adding a little more pigment to the brush. A little less water, a little more pigment, so that'll give me a darker value. And here I'm going around the edge of the flowers, the edge of the petals, to give a little shape, give a little dimension. So the darker layer here is to give the petals a little more information about what they are, how big they are, the size, the shapes. Between the petals, defining the petals themselves, and to give a little interest and a little bit of texture. So this darker value then gives me a very interesting ideas of the shape of the flower, shape of the petals, and the color is the same. It's just a darker value. So that light value now is next to that darker value, which gives it a nice shape and a nice contrast here to start off with the design of the flowers. Using a small round brush allows me to get into those small places with the point of the brush, with a little extra side of the brush. Here I'm just kind of making sure I've covered all the areas, going back over again just a little bit. Moving that paint around. It's still wet, so I can still move it around with the brush. Keep it moving. So there's the darker edges that I just finished with the second layer. Now the third layer is going to be the darkest value, and I'm not going to cover the whole petal. What I'm going to do here, I'm mixing more pigment of the Opera paint, and I'm making a really fine point on the end of the brush. Now I'm going to go into the center of the flowers. I'm going to make the center of the flowers a lot darker, and they're little dots and dashes there, so I'm making the point of the brush real sharp, and I'm going in there and just picking out little areas in the center of the flower to define the flower a little bit, give a little dimension, give a little good interest. So this is the third layer I put on the flowers. I started out with the background of the petals, then I added a darker layer to the edges of the petals, and here I'm concentrating more on the center, showing those little dots that are part of the flower itself, the characteristic of the flower. The color's the same, it's all opera. That's why I'm calling this painting the Opera Flowers, because it's all the same paint. Now finishing up the centers, getting a little more definition, a little more contrast in the center, making it darker. Now bring it up for a close-up view. You see the full blossom of each petal, well defined with 3 layers of paint. Now I'm going to mix up some colors for the leaves. I'm going to use lemon yellow and cerulean blue to make a green. I'm going to make a mixture. I'm going to start out with the lemon yellow. I'm going to paint in the leaves with that lemon yellow, the shape of the leaf with the round brush. And then I'm going to pick up another brush with just the blue in it. And this is called a charging technique. You have one wet color of one color, and then you charge it in with a second color. And this, you get an automatic mixture of the 2 colors. And that's called charging. In watercolors, that's a charging the colors. It's a very nice technique. It gives you a variety. It also gives you an interesting color combination, depending on which colors you use. Here I'm using a light yellow and a light blue color to make my light color green. Now continuing around the composition here with mixing the lemon yellow in with the cerulean blue, using the charging technique. One of my favorite watercolor techniques is to use this technique. I start with one color and then I'll add a second color in there, in with a mixture to get a combination. I always think it's a good idea not to have just one color out of the palette, is to use a mixture of colors to give you not only a variety but a more interesting combinations of those 2 colors. To give more interest, to give a little more simplicity in the technique, and to make it a little more dynamic. Now finishing up with the leaves, finishing up here the same technique, using the lemon yellow first, and while it's still wet, I'm going to pick up the cerulean blue and charge it into the yellow to give me that green mixture. Very, very useful technique. And you get a variety of colors. Every time you do this, you'll get a different color, because you may put more color, more quantity of more color than the other, and you'll get a different mixture. So that's why watercolor can be very interesting. You'll get a different mixture every time you charge these 2 colors together. Also, the amount of water is a factor. You want to keep them moist, keep them wet, but yet allow them to flow and to mix together. That's one of the advantages of watercolor. Also painted in the center. You'll see I painted green also in the center portions here to get a little variety of green against that contrasting red, which is the opera. Now, adding the background, I think this is one area that will be very interesting. I'm going to use two brushes, the Holbein No. 6 round brush and then the Holbein 3/4 inch flat brush. And I'm using one color, Cobalt Blue. Now in the round brush, I'm going to use just water. I'm going to load up the brush with water and I'm going to paint around the edges next to the leaves and the petals. I'm going to put the water there, right next to the flower arrangement. So this is a wet on wet technique. I'm going to pick up the Cobalt Blue with the flat brush and go in and add in the color on top of that wet background that I just put in with the round brush. So these two brushes now give me the technique of wet and wet, but also a control of how I'm adding that background next to that flower. Now I'm going to go back in with the round brush with the point. That number 14 round is really great. And now I'm coming in close to the edges. Now I'm defining the background next to that. Here I'm working around the flower petals. I'm able to take that background color now and push it in next to the subject. Keep them separated. Now the petal itself is dry, but the water is also next to it, so they won't interfere. And using the round brush to add in some blue in between the flower and the petal. You get a lot of control over a round brush with a real fine point. That number 14 rounds are outstanding synthetic brush to use. It holds a lot of moisture and it works well with that point. Here I'm going back in and wet the background again with the round brush. And then the flat brush with the paint, going back in to fill in the background. A wet and wet technique, but also controlling the edges around the subject. Then going back in with the round brush and defining the detail next to the petals and next to the actual leaves of the flowers. It's a very effective way to put a background in around a composition like a flower arrangement or anything else that you want to use with watercolors. Now wet the paper first, put in the background paint, and then move in with the round brush with a nice strong point and fill in the detail. Getting close to the edges. Last part here, wetting the background again with just water. The flat brush putting in the background paint, Cobalt Blue. And then using the round brush to go in and bring in the detail close to the edges of the leaves and to the petals. Makes a very effective background technique. And there's a close-up of the background combination, and it works out very well. That's a good way to do a background. And I'm calling this painting Opera Flowers. But now I'll show you the results of the painting. I made a frame for it, and also discuss the possibility of making a card out of this particular project of the Opera Flowers. So that's the close-up of the finished painting on watercolor paper and watercolor. And first option would be to make a painting out of it, which I cut a mat board to frame it, and that would be an 8x10 size picture frame, and that'd be a nice gift for someone for a gift. The other option would be to create a greeting card. And I would start out with a cardstock or made a pink to match the pink flowers, and then do another piece of cardstock to create a black border, and then crop out the flower painting, and then mount it on here. I did that. I did a simulation on Photoshop, and I'll show you the results of that. Here's a simulation of the using Photoshop. I did a copy of the photograph and then a cut and paste. And here they are both together, the painting on the left and the simulated card on the right. Here's a list of material found on my website, and also a list of things used from Gina K Design. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and press the bell to be notified of my next video. Give me a thumbs up, it helps with my ratings, and give me some comments about the video. See you in the next video.